This deadly nurse is believed to have killed 40 babies in hospitals across Texas and managed to avoid being caught because the hospitals covered it up. Friend, before we go any further, I would like to humbly request you please subscribe to my channel. So I can reach 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible. Your support truly means the world to me. So please subscribe. Hello viewers! In today's video, we uncover the chilling story of a Texas nurse who may have killed 40 babies under the cover of hospital walls and how she managed to keep her dark secret hidden for so long. Without further delay, let's begin unraveling this disturbing story. Few things are more shocking or harder to prove than a nurse intentionally hurting children. But in 1981, inside the pediatric ICU at San Antonio's Charity Hospital, some staff members started to believe that's exactly what was happening. Nurse Genene Jones was hurting children. There was no other explanation. The terrifying pattern was obvious, but as hospital supervisors ignored it, the sense of dread only grew. Babies kept dying under strange circumstances. But for over a year, parents and hospital staff were ignored as administrators. Afraid of lawsuits and bad publicity, chose to stay silent. Jones' deadly spree finally ended when she moved to a small-town pediatric clinic where 8 more children suddenly stopped breathing and a 15-month-old girl lost her life. The Death Shift, the first book by best-selling author Peter Ilkhind, traces this chilling true crime story from Jones' troubled childhood to her emotional trials. It ends with a disturbing reality. Despite evidence that she killed more than a dozen children, Jones was set to be released from prison on mandatory parole in early 2018. For Diana and Crescencio Hogita Jr., the sad news came over the phone. It wasn't entirely unexpected. Their baby, Christopher James, just a year old, had spent nearly half his life in the hospital. Born with a severe heart defect, he was admitted to the pediatric ICU with pneumonia and diarrhea in December 1980. By May, he had developed hepatitis, and infections overwhelmed his small body. The call came from his nurse, Genene Jones, who had cared for him from the start and seemed so sympathetic. "He's gone to play with the angels," Genene told them. After gathering the clothes, they planned to bury their son, including a special blanket. Diana had lovingly crocheted the Hoguetas, climbed into their car, and sped toward San Antonio. They lived in San Angelo, over 200 miles away, but had brought Chris to Bexar County Hospital to ensure he received the best care possible. 3 hours later, exhausted and with tears in their eyes, they walked into the ICU to see their baby one last time. But what they saw left them stunned. Christopher was still alive. He lay quietly in his ICU bed, hooked up to the machines, just as he had been for months. When they asked for Genene, the nurse who had told them he had died, they were informed that she had finished her shift and gone home. Chris Hogita was one of the babies Genene Jones fixated on. Day after day, for weeks, she insisted on being the only one to care for him. During this time, Genene, who rarely spent time with her own children, even stopped attending counseling sessions with her husband, Edward. It was as if she had shifted her maternal instincts away from her own kids, one of whom often challenged her hand, onto these vulnerable children she could completely control. Later, she would chillingly say, "About Chris, he was my boy." On May 14, 1981, just after 11 p.m., Genene Jones walked out of baby Chris's hospital room to tell the next shift how he was doing. Chris was very sick, and many people thought he might not live much longer. He often had scary problems with his heartbeat. But some nurses were getting tired of hearing Genene always say that Chris was going to die soon. She would often say, "Tonight's the night." While the nurses were in the ICU break room giving reports, a loud crash suddenly echoed in the hall. Genene ran out screaming. Baby Chris, who had a weak heart, was found hanging off the bed. His arm restraints and the breathing tube had caught him. Genene had left the bed rails down, and he had rolled off the bed. She picked him up and put him back on the bed. He seemed okay at that moment. Later, Genene told the story to other nurses who weren't there, laughing while she told it. She was given a written warning for leaving the bed rails down, but she still kept taking care of Chris just a week later while Genene was watching him. Chris went into cardiac arrest and died. Chris's parents were called to the hospital for the worst reason. Their baby had died. They asked Genene to stay with Chris's body until they could get there alone in the room. Genene took off the plastic tubes from his small body. She gently washed him, crying and talking to him softly as she worked. Later, Genene said, "I would bathe the children and sing to them while I did it." If that sounds insane, tough luck. Genene once said, "If you can't die with dignity, why live with dignity?" She paused and then added, "We would talk to them even after they were gone." We're not God, who knows when the spirit truly leaves the body after washing baby. Chris, for the last time, Genene wrapped him in a blanket. She sat down and held his lifeless body against her chest. She stayed like that for over an hour, waiting for his parents to arrive. Diana and Crescencio Hoguera did not know about the bad choices Genene made while taking care of their son, and the things they did know, they chose to forgive. So, on the day they buried baby Chris, Genene Jones stood with the family and other mourners as a welcome guest at his funeral. The death of baby Chris Hoguera was just the beginning. Over the next 4 months, strange emergencies began to happen in the children's intensive care unit. Babies who seemed stable would suddenly stop breathing. Some started having seizures, while others had their hearts stop or beat very fast without warning. Babies with 4 needles would start bleeding, and their blood would not clot. Many of these babies were already very sick, but what happened to them was strange and could not be explained by doctors. One of the victims was little Terry Lynn Garcia. She was just 3 weeks old when she was admitted to the hospital for diarrhea and vomiting. A month later, her condition worsened, and she was moved to the pediatric ICU with a fever, looking pale and weak. On her first night there, Terry Lynn's tiny heart slowed dangerously 3 times before it finally stopped for good. Doctors managed to bring her back, but the following evening, her heart stopped again. It took powerful drugs, 2 electric shocks, and 90 minutes of relentless CPR to save her tiny life. The next day, Terry Lynn began to bleed. Her blood pressure crashed, and she struggled to breathe, needing a respirator to keep her alive. But after 2 more cardiac arrests, her fight ended. She passed away at 6:15 p.m. on August 11th. Patricia Zambrano was just 3 months old when she was brought into the ICU, only 2 days after Terry Lynn's death. She'd suffered seizures after a routine vaccination and arrived at 7 p.m., placed on a respirator and under Genene Jones's watch. That same night, Patricia's heart stopped, but doctors revived her. When other nurses were working, baby Patricia had no more seizures, and they noted she was stable. But when Genene came back, she said Patricia's seizures were suddenly getting worse. At 5:30 p.m., Patricia's heart stopped again, but the doctors were able to bring her back. Later, Patricia's heart stopped for the 3rd and final time. She died at 9:36 p.m. on August 14th. 4-month-old Paul Villarreal went to the hospital in late September for a simple skull surgery. But instead of getting better in the children's ICU, his condition quickly got worse. A day after the surgery, Paul had a seizure, and the doctors had to put him on a breathing machine. Then blood started pouring out from the tube in Paul's throat. His tiny heart stopped, but the doctors were able to bring him back. The next night, the bleeding started again, and Paul's condition got worse. His heart stopped once more, and he died at 8:30 p.m. later. Lab tests showed the cause of the bleeding. Paul's blood was not able to clot, and no one knew why. Twice, doctors discovered that patients' respirators had been mysteriously tampered with. One night, at 11 p.m., 2-year-old Rosemary Vega, who was recovering from a routine heart surgery, began seizing and grew dangerously sluggish after being placed on a ventilator. Hours later, at 2:15 a.m., surgery resident checked the machine and was alarmed to find it delivering far too little oxygen. A physician's note would later read, "Ventilator setting had been altered by unknown source." Despite efforts to save her, Rosemary's young life slipped away, and she was pronounced dead at 7:52 p.m. that day. 4-month-old Placida Ibarra was admitted to the ICU for treatment of heart failure, her tiny body already fighting to stay alive. But on her very first evening, at 7:20 p.m., nurses discovered that her respirator was pumping out 100% oxygen a dangerously high concentration that can dangerously disrupt blood chemistry in fragile infants. For 5 days, Placida clung to life. Then, without warning, she went limp, her heart pounding wildly out of control. Despite desperate efforts to save her, Placida's battle ended at 10:25 p.m. In a small village, a cat named Whiskers too, many babies were dying in the ICU on. They were dying from conditions that shouldn't have been fatal, conditions that other children had survived in the past. Some kids managed to pull through, but only after suddenly facing terrifying, unexplained complications. Doctors who usually handled 3 or 4 resuscitations a month were now performing CPR again and again. In August 1981 alone, there were 9 resuscitations. By September, that number had climbed to 13. Whispers began to swirl among the residents. Something was terribly wrong. Discovered a magic fish in a pond. The fish promised 3 wishes in exchange for its freedom. Whiskers wished for endless fish, a cozy bed, and a bell that rang softly. The fish granted all 3 wishes and swam away, leaving Whiskers content and purring in the sun. At first, the frantic search for answers clung to benign explanations. Was there a hidden germ circulating in the air? A local strain of Legionnaire's disease sweeping through San Antonio? Maybe a new, aggressive type of meningitis? Some doctors wondered if the ICU's medical equipment was contaminated. Others whispered that it might just be a cruel streak of bad luck. But deep down, many felt an unsettling truth. Something far more sinister was at play. But as the emergencies piled up, a darker pattern began to surface. These children weren't just dying at random, they were dying during a single nursing shift. The 3 to 11 p.m. evening shift, and even more chilling, they were dying under the care of one nurse, again and again. They were dying when Genene was on duty. One child went into cardiac arrest on 3 consecutive days, each time during the 3 to 11 p.m. shift. Each time while Genene was on duty, I'd leave a patient I thought was stable, recalled RN Tony Grosshaupt. She'd come on shift, and the next day, I'd find out the patient had taken a bad turn. Seizures, a code, something serious. It happened over and over. It got to the point where I dreaded coming back the next day. As the codes and deaths kept mounting, working in the ICU, already a challenging job, became nearly unbearable. The unit was understaffed, forcing everyone to work extra shifts, and the weight of constant emergencies was crushing. In an effort to ease the tension, Dr. Robotham arranged for a psychiatrist to meet regularly with the ICU staff. Meanwhile, Genene's grim predictions of looming medical crises were becoming disturbingly accurate. When she announced during shift reports that a baby would die, the other nurses, unnerved, would prepare emergency medications in advance, waiting for the inevitable code. The weight fell heaviest on the nurses working alongside Genene during the 3 to 11 shift, where nearly every emergency seemed to unfold. One especially grim night, chaos consumed the unit. 2 babies coded at the same time. Doctors and nurses scrambled to stabilize the first infant, then rushed to the second, only to lose the child despite their efforts. As they turned back to the first baby, a second arrest struck. This time, it was fatal. The night felt endless, the air heavy with the despair of lives slipping away under their watch. It was getting too much to bear, recalled Judy Cocchola. I was constantly depressed, weighed down by the frustration of working ourselves to exhaustion, while children kept dying all around us. The tragedies became so relentless that the code's once moments of intense urgency started to feel like a dark, bitter joke. Judy couldn't take it anymore. After 9 heavy months in the ICU, she walked away in September, desperate to escape the unending grief that haunted every shift. Genene herself appeared shattered by the wave of deaths and near-deaths in the unit. They're going to start calling me the death nurse because I'm always the one taking these babies downstairs, she told a resident, her voice heavy with apparent sorrow. In September, when yet another of her tiny patients died, Genene collapsed into a chair in the corner, sobbing uncontrollably. A young doctor approached to comfort her, only to find Genene looking up with tear-swollen eyes, her voice trembling as she asked, "Why do babies always die when I'm around?" Many working in the pediatric ICU at Bayard County Hospital found themselves asking the same chilling question. In whispered conversations around cafeteria tables and quiet exchanges in the hallways, a dark suspicion began to grow. The nurses and doctors who couldn't ignore the pattern anymore started calling it what it felt like, the death shift, the hours when Genene was on duty. Viewers, this was the horrifying story of Genene Jones, the death nurse whose deadly secrets shattered countless families. What are your thoughts on this chilling case? Share them in the comments below and let us know how you feel about it. This unsettling tragedy. What are your thoughts on this chilling story? Share your opinions in the comments below. We'd love to know how you feel about these shocking events. Thank you for watching. If this chilling story gripped you, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories that peel back the darkest layers of history. And remember, if you or someone you know is struggling with heavy thoughts, please reach out to a mental health professional. Your life and well-being are far more important than any story we cover here. Take care of yourself, and until next time, I'll see you in another haunting case that demands to be remembered.